Do you ever get that nagging feeling that you've missed your chance? That the window to really, truly change your life has slammed shut? Well, we're here to completely dismantle that myth by diving into the incredible story of Rich Roll. Okay, let's just start with this quote, because it completely reframes what we think is possible. This right here, this is the heart of what we're talking about today. The idea that your life can be just beginning, no matter what your age is.
All right, so first things first, let's tackle this limiting belief head on. We're going to start with what I like to call the "it's too late" myth.
Just look at this timeline. It completely shatters our conventional ideas of success, right? Rich didn't hit his athletic peak until he was 43. He wrote his first book at 44 and started his now world-famous podcast at 45. Think about that for a second. Some of his biggest, most life-defining achievements happened in what many of us would call the second half. But to really get how incredible this reinvention was, we have to go back, way back. We have to look at his descent to rock bottom. You see, Rich wasn't always this picture of confidence. As a kid, he was bullied, he was deeply insecure. We're talking thick glasses, an eye patch, even headgear. And that experience, it shaped him into someone who was, in his own words, a people-pleasing, approval-addicted person, just constantly chasing external rewards to feel like he was worthy. The only place he ever felt truly safe? Underwater, in the quiet of a swimming pool.
And this chase for approval, it led him down a path he calls the unfulfilling funnel. On the outside, everything looked perfect. Stanford, law school, a fancy corporate job. He was checking all the right boxes, getting all that external validation he was craving.
But on the inside, it felt completely, totally wrong. He put it perfectly. My whole life was jamming a square peg into a round hole. And that feeling of being on a path that just doesn't fit, I think that's something a lot of us can probably relate to. So what do you do with that constant discomfort, that noise? Well, for Rich, alcohol became the answer. It quieted things down. For the first time, it made him feel comfortable in his own skin. But, as you can imagine, that solution quickly turned into a much, much bigger problem.
This journey eventually led him to what we all call rock bottom. But it's so important that we redefine what that actually means. Rock bottom isn't a place, it's a decision. It's that critical moment where the pain of staying the same finally becomes greater than the fear of change.
So how does that change actually begin? Well, that brings us to the spark of willingness. Willingness is a fascinating thing. It's not some constant state of being. It's a fleeting moment, a really brief window of opportunity. And what's interesting is that it doesn't always show up at your absolute lowest point, but rather when the emotional pain hits its absolute peak. And Rich's story is the perfect example of this. You'd think his moment of clarity would come after a DUI or a night in jail, right? But no. His willingness to get sober arrived on a relatively normal morning, long after all that external chaos had died down. But the internal pain was still screaming. That was his moment. That was his window.
He got sober, but believe it or not, that was only his first reinvention. About a decade later, another one was about to kick off. Let's jump to reinvention begins at 40.
The scale of this next transformation is it's staggering. At 39, he was 50 pounds overweight, totally out of shape. Just 4 years later, at 43, he was an elite, ultra-endurance athlete, finishing a ridiculously brutal 320-mile race. The change is almost unbelievable. So what was the catalyst for this change? It was another knock from the universe. On the eve of his 40th birthday, he was just walking up a simple flight of stairs and found himself gasping for air, with a tightness in his chest. It was another one of those moments. And this led him to discover one of the most powerful principles in this entire story. Mood follows action. So often, we wait to feel motivated before we do something. But he realized that's completely backwards. You have to take the action first, and the right feelings, the motivation, the confidence, they follow as a consequence. And this idea connects to something even deeper. As Rich says, self-esteem is a product of performing esteemable acts. You don't think your way to higher self-worth. You act your way there. You do something you can be proud of, and that good feeling follows. It's that simple.
So what does all this mean for you? How can we actually apply this stuff? Let's bring it all home in our final section, your one contrary action.
If there is one single takeaway from Rich's entire journey, it is this: health is the foundation. If you feel stuck, if you don't know where to possibly begin, start right there. When your physical health is in order, your mind clears up, your energy comes back. Everything else is downstream from your well-being. So how do you capture your own moment of willingness? It's really a simple three-step formula. 1. Acknowledge that feeling, that little voice that says, I need to change when it arrives. 2. Promise yourself, right then and there, that you will act on it immediately. Not tomorrow, not next week, right now. And 3. Take just one small contrary action. One tiny thing that goes against your old pattern.
Because you have to remember this final thought from Rich. Even the most unbelievable personal transformations are a function of tiny actions repeated relentlessly. It's not about one giant, heroic leap. It's about all those small, consistent steps adding up over time.
So, that leaves us with one final and maybe provocative question. This isn't about Rich Roll anymore. This one's about you. What is the one thing you've promised yourself you would do? And what tiny contrary action can you take right now to begin?